Well, welcome back to another session. I hope you were well. Um, I'm going to start in today's session a series of conversations, a series of lectures, discussions, thought processes, which I intend to share over the next few series. I usually do not know how long one particular series might last or how long it might take. I tend to go based on perhaps how far I can push myself with regards to sharing ideas that have some meaning. Um, in this new series, I am going to be speaking to the burden of performance for men, the burden of performance for men. Now, in many ways, this new series has been inspired by where I ended the previous one. I titled the previous series The Challenge to Succeed, in which I covered for men traits, behaviors, observations that can serve as a guide, as a clue to whether you have an operating, you might say, an operating system installed in yourself that is hindering your success as a man, but most importantly, in relationships. I thought perhaps it would be useful to build on the conversation by talking about the burden of performance. Now, make no mistake, if you are a man, whether you are young or whether you are old, we carry on our shoulders as men a level of expectation, societal, personal, and sometimes familial. There is a burden of performance that we as men must shoulder, which women do not actually have the same level of expectation. Let me say something perhaps that should not be controversial, but in today's society it might be. The expectation requirement, the burden of performance on men far outweighs in several degrees compared to women. For example, society generally has come to see men as success objects, resource objects. Society has also come to see men as, you might say, disposable objects. In the event of wars, the men have to remain and fight, and the women can leave. In the event of a war, the men have to go to the battlefield and fight, and the women can stay in safety. We are not the same as women. As a matter of fact, a woman can, provided she has some level of attractiveness and beauty and youth, can live her entire life on very, very, very easy, you might say, on a lower gear 1 and gear 2, never going beyond 3 or 4. And society doesn't frown upon a woman, which is partly why women tend to choose and have more interest in people rather than creating things, whereas men have more of an interest in building things or creating things or producing things. So we have a burden of performance that far outweighs what most women would ever understand. The mistake most men make is most men have been raised since the 1960s in the West to think or to expect that women understand the burden that we shoulder. We don't, or rather, women don't. Many cannot fathom what it means to be a man. When you combine all of that with the fact that masculinity has been under attack for more than 70 years, relentlessly, the intensity, the frequency, the duration has continued to increase. Most men have therefore lost the importance of keeping their eye on the prize, and most men do not understand what the burden of performance is, and therefore why they should even be successful. Now, across all the developed countries, 54 of the developed countries, boys are performing at a level far below what girls are performing at in reading and writing, If you move beyond young boys and girls and you go into those who have chronologically adults, 18 and above, even in college, not just enrollment, graduation, we have women graduating at a level far outpacing men. We have a void, and we have a void within most boys. And most men lack a sense of purpose. They lack a sense of the need for success. And they don't understand what that burden of performance has to be. Any country, any nation is only as successful or strong and will only last as far as its men. So let me start today's session and the series that progresses with the following conversations. Number one, why success matters for you as a man. I never knew I would have to explain why success should matter for you. But we've got to a point, and I say this for the younger ones, not the older men, but more for the younger ones, especially for the men, young men who are below 18. Success is everything. Make no mistake. Do not listen to what people tell you. Now, I grew up and I was raised by two great parents, a father who was incredible, great man. I often say, and I've always said that since I can remember, that if I grew up, this was when I was younger, that if I were to grow up to be half the man my father was, still is, then I would be a great father, and I would be a great husband, and I would be a great citizen. My father was exceptional. I also had a tremendously loving, kind, impressive, forgiving, nurturing, kind mother. Just an angel in human form. And with the concept of having the best of both worlds, I took qualities from them, and I was nurtured in such qualities to enable me to focus on why success had to be my priority. Now, when we talk about success, many people were raised, such I was, from an environmental perspective, that success is not everything. We conflated money with success. We conflated wealth with success. We conflated prosperity with success. We were raised not to be vain, not to think about ourselves, to keep our focus on something greater than ourselves. We were never told that success should be our duty, an obligation, and a responsibility. So as I start these series of sessions, my message to you as a man is success is your duty. Success should be an obligation that you shoulder. It is a responsibility, and it should be a pursuit, unapologetically. The key question, however, is what is success? I'll give you a definition that I think has stood the test of time. And this simply means you can apply this definition across any area of your life. The progressive realization, the progressive pursuit, the progressive movement in the direction of a worthy goal or ideal. That is success. But it begins with knowing where you are, where you want to get to, and if you move progressively towards that goal, towards that vision, towards that dream, we call that success. So in many ways, success is both a destination and a journey. It's a process. It's the joy you find along that pathway where you progressively realize your goal. Now, you may never get to your goal. Such is life. The time, the sand in the hourglass sometimes runs out for some of us, all of us. So we may never get there. But here is perhaps the most powerful part of that definition. That goal should move as you pursue it. In other words, you cannot keep that goal stagnant. Or, to say it in a different way, as you approach and find yourself closer to the goal, you should set another goal so that you are looking forward to something. It's the same reason why we have breakfast, but we don't just stop with breakfast. We have lunch, but then we don't stop again. We have dinner, and we start again. The progressive realization of a worthy goal and the ability to continue to set new goals and dream. That is success. So as a man, young, old, there has to be something that drives you, something that calls to you to become the best self. Now, here is the key part of the whole success definition. A goal is something you choose, but we do not choose goals just because we want it. We choose goals to see what it would make of us in the present and during that journey, and what it would transform us into becoming as we pursue the goal. Let me say it very differently. One of my early mentors said, set a goal so large that it terrifies you and it excites you at the same time. In other words, set a goal that is beyond your reach, but something that evokes an emotional response within you. Something that causes you to wake up with excitement, that gives you a sense of purpose and meaning. Now, I have another mentor who said, set your goals so small that you cannot fail. Set your goals so small that you cannot fail. Now, both definitions or both statements are not opposing to each other. Remember my definition, the progressive movement towards a goal. Yes, you need a master vision that is far away, but it simply means you take that goal and you break it down into sub-goals so that you have inspiration from the attainment of a sub-goal that leads you towards the attainment of the next goal, progressively towards the final goal. So the first part of what I will share with you is the importance of success. In setting a goal, we do not choose goals because other people would be happy with the goals we choose. We choose goals that are worthy of us. We choose goals for which, over time, when we look back at our lives and what we've invested in pursuit of the goals, we agree that our resources and time, the investment of our life in pursuit of that goal, was a worthwhile exercise. The goal, therefore, has to be an ideal. An ideal refers to an idea that you've fallen in love with. So now we have about 5 or 6 definitions: success, goals, ideas, and love. Young men these days are not being taught how to use their imagination and how to dream. The first step in becoming your best self is you have to dream. You have to look up. You have to use your imagination, the theatre of your mind, and create a future. Something that could be. Something that you want to have. Something you want to do. Something who or person you want to become. Now, this means that the burden of performance comes into the picture. Here's perhaps the beauty. You choose a goal, but a goal chooses you. In choosing a goal, you have to give up something to gain something. You have to sacrifice. Sacrifice simply means giving up something of a lower nature to gain something of a higher nature. But here is perhaps, in my second book, I wrote, the book was called The Good Life. Either the first book or the second book, one of the two. I wrote something that I think I'd like to share with you, which is, in order to have success, there's a price you have to pay. The price has to be paid in full. The price must be paid in advance. Sacrifice simply means giving up something of a lower nature to gain something of a higher nature. So you must pay the price in full and in advance to get the goal. So as young men, or even older men, the question I always ask people is, what are you willing to give to get what you want? First question. Second question, what are you willing to give up to get what you want? Third question, when do you intend to start? The burden of performance for men is much higher. And so my invitation, my challenge to succeed for you is, when do you intend to start? And are you willing to accept that burden of performance? Now, you may not accept all of it immediately, but the key part is to accept the idea, the challenge, the invitation to be successful. Over the past, I have been teaching for more than a decade now. I started before social media began, and it was funny how things have progressed. Teaching in halls, hotel, conference rooms, schools, hired venues, and what I have found fascinating, and I'll speak to this towards the end, is over the years, as society changes, the challenge for men evolves in a funny way. Social media has made a huge difference in what men are perceived to be and what we are being asked to be. Relationships have become an important part of the whole journey. So we talk about success, but that could be success in business, your professional life, health, wealth, mind, your well-being. It could be success in the level of prosperity, but it can also be relationally. Now, 80% of our happiness will come from relationships. Our inner circle, those who we spend time with, but most importantly, our intimate relationships. And therefore, as men, in finding success, most men sabotage their success on the altar of relationships. You need not look further. History is filled with great men, successful men, who achieve incredible feats, but who for some reason had not disciplined themselves, disciplined their loins, and therefore threw the entire success away. We can look at David, we can look at Solomon, and the list goes on. A woman always plays a part in the downfall of every man, implicitly or explicitly. It's not our intention, but if you're not complete as a man, you will make mistakes. And one of the key parts of a man's journey towards success is not making money. It's whether you've developed self-mastery over your desires and needs. Now, I'll say a few things that I hope will be of some value. Every man is only as faithful as the temptations he overcomes. Every man is also only as successful as the temptations he overcomes. Every man can only go as far as the temptations he overcomes. So, the key question would then be, what temptations would you as a man have to go through and overcome to be successful? Now, that might be one of the series that I will do. In any case, let me walk you through 4 stages. You're born a male. You move from male to boyhood. That occurs usually by mimicking, mirroring, copying, or following the footpathways or steps of others. Let me say that again. As a young boy, you haven't developed your intellectual faculties. You have your sensory faculties, the ability to see, smell, taste, touch, and your sight. You also have what we call intellectual faculties: imagination, will, memory, intuition, perception. All of these intellectual faculties enable you to use your mind, your intellect. It takes a while before that's developed. So at a young age, you're like a sponge. You absorb everything that comes to you. Your conscious mind, the ability to see, smell, taste, touch, sight, receives all the input and information. But your subconscious mind is open because you haven't developed your intellectual faculties so that you can accept or reject ideas. So you go from male to boyhood simply by association, influence, environment, and rarely by your intellectual ability to choose. So having a good role model as a boy is very important to your success. But even if you do not have one, a time will come when you get to the age of reason, where you can think inductively and deductively, and you can choose or reject old ideas and start new ideas. You move from male to boyhood, and then you move to manhood. You go from boyhood to manhood by work. Study, practice, work. You raise your understanding, you study, you find knowledge, information, you develop some level of comprehension so you can gain understanding, and then you start to apply what you've learned, which is how wisdom comes. At the point you could reach manhood, most men can either stop or they can move forward. The next stage is to be a gentleman. That requires crafting. You're crafted into being a gentleman. So you're born male. Through work, you become a man. By craft and fine-tuning, you become a gentleman. Most men, most boys, I should say, unfortunately, from a societal perspective and a social perspective, we do not have good role models as fathers in the community, not just in the families, but in the community. And so most men skip the manhood phase. The series I did previously was speaking to beta installation in men, beta males, beta men. And at the core of what I was sharing was, if you skipped or missed the important lessons of manhood, there's almost no chance, almost no, doesn't mean it's 100%, almost no chance that you can have complete manhood and the manhood value. And the reason is a simple one. It takes a man to train a man. You cannot, as a man, be trained by a woman. Just cannot. The ability to go out and hunt, the attitude, the skill, the thought process, the emotional stoicism that comes from manhood is something we learn. Now, we learn from different people, but we have to learn. If we do not pick those up from the right role models, or you might say masculine frame examples, we tend to defer back to the feminine, and that means we're feminized. Now, I won't go into the same conversations as the previous series, but let me say this. Coming back to the whole concept of success and the burden of performance, an important part of how you should think as a man is a simple question. What is my value as a man? What is my value as a man? Now, I'm going to do you a favor. We've raised a lot of young men to live in their feelings. Facts do not care about your feelings. Facts are very stubborn things. We all have a value, but let me dispel any reservations you might have or reluctance by making a statement. We are spiritual beings. We have an intellect. We live in a physical body. On the spiritual plane of consciousness, we're perfect. We don't need improvement. Our value is infinite. Our physical body has a limit. It has a value. Our intellect has a limit. All right, our intellect does not really have a limit. But within the physical plane of consciousness, recognizing we have a limited life, there is a cap. But we start with nothing and we develop that intellect. So those who have developed the ability to think have a higher value if they transform and convert that thought process into tangible things. So metaphysically, you have infinite value. And we're all the same as men. Spiritually, we are of infinite value, all the same as men. From a societal perspective, we have equality because we're all citizens. In this particular instance, let's just say we're all British subjects. So I'm not referring to your value in your family or your value to the nation or your value from the transcendental perspective. I'm saying in the marketplace where you have competing, individuals, men, there is a value. And one of the most important ways in order for you to get to your goal is to know how you should be measuring your progress and yourself. I did a series of sessions in which I explained how to assess a man's value. I will recommend you go back and watch these series, but let me draw out perhaps a few things from what I shared. In assessing a man's value, we use different standards. I'll go through a few very quickly. Economic intrinsic value, EIV, is the first. The second, but this is in no chronological order, randomly. Your non-sexual marketplace value, NSMV. Your sexual marketplace value, SMV. Your reproductive fertility value, RFV. Husband's value, HV. Character value, CV. Manhood value, MV. Gentleman's value, GV. Those are my contribution in how I assess a man's value. This simply means on every single metric in the marketplace, comparing one man to another, you have to assess your value. Now, the younger you are, the lower you will score in much of those areas. But the older you get, the higher you should score, all things remaining equal. Now, the reason I've said this is for a simple reason. We go from male to boy to man to gentleman. This simply means that as a man, you should be assessing how well you're performing as you transition through those stages based on how you should rank yourself as a man. Very key. There are two parts to a man's value that I consider to be the most important. CV and MV. Character value, manhood value. Those two, in my opinion, would make up roughly about 65 to about 70%. My preference is 70. I think it's more 70, sometimes even higher, of a man's overall value. Now, this simply means that all the other valuation tools I've given you, economic intrinsic value and the rest, only make up about 30%, sometimes going up to about, say, 35% of a man's value. If you can nail character value and manhood value, and you start early, by the time you turn 18 and you move towards 22, you will be a good man, and you will have the right frame as a man, and you'll be the right example. We don't keep score just in money. We don't keep score just in your looks. We don't keep score just in your age. Age is not in the success equation. Some of the oldest people I've ever met are some of the dumbest people I've also ever met. Sometimes I've also met young people that are, in my opinion, the smartest I've ever met. So age is not in the success equation. Decisions and wisdom is what you find in the success equation. So whether you were young or whether you were older, disavow yourself of the thought process that it's a numbers game, that time is the reason why you haven't achieved your success. Simply focus on wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And that will get you on the right path towards ensuring that as you journey through the stages, the 4 stages, that you improve your value at every stage. Now, I have to bring today's session to a close, so let me go through a few things that I think are important. For most young men, I went through the same process. When you get to the age of reason, when you become chronologically an adult, 18, prior to 18, someone may have been responsible for your life and therefore your conditioning, the paradigms that have actually controlled and directed your life, the habits. The paradigm is simply a multitude of habits. What you think and how you feel and your actions will form your character. Do it repeatedly over time, they become habits. A chain of habits are too light to be felt until they become too heavy to be broken. Association affects you just as importantly as your genes and your IQ. It simply means there's something called a pregame, that the younger you are, the more likely It is that someone else has written the software program running your operating system. One of your tasks before you start the success journey is audit the installation system. For example, I think I'm using Windows 11. I think so, 11 or 12. But if I installed Windows 5 on the same operating software, the hardware, on the same hardware, different software on the same hardware, the performance of the computer will be different. Someone may have installed your software. You are responsible for uninstalling and reinstalling. Put it differently, you are responsible for upgrading your software to the software that will get you from where you are to where you want to get to. Very important statement. The series I did previously was a way of providing you with 15 items, traits, characteristics, behaviors on how you could assess and see whether the installation you have is perhaps one of the root causes of your failure or your lack of fulfillment as a man within relationships. Now, once you've carried out the audit process, here is one of the most empowering things I can say to you. You do not have to live your life and have the same outcomes and results as you did in the past, except by choice. Let me say that again. You do not have to live your life and live with the same outcomes as you did in the past, except you choose. Like a book, you can turn a page. And my invitation to you in this series is to turn that page and start anew. Sit down, decide who you want to become, decide what you want, determine where you want to go, make a list of all of your goals, and then let that be your ideal. Fall in love with that ideal and move forward in the direction of the goals. Now, I said something at the start, which is you have to sacrifice something. It will not come easy, and it will never be free. You're going to have to give up something. And here is perhaps where most of you will fail. I hate to say this. Most of you are willing to give your best. Most of you will give your best. Many of you will give all you have. Very few of you will do whatever it takes. Those who are willing to do whatever it takes are the ones who will be successful. Your best, my best, was never and is never good enough. Just purely based on the frictional resistance in the process. You have to adjust for that. And if you did, it means your best will never be good enough. It will fall short. So the key question, therefore, is, are you willing to do whatever it takes to be successful, to be your best self, to find fulfillment, to pursue mastery, to attain what perhaps you may not have wanted to attain in years past, but which you now want to attain because you've accepted the burden of performance, which comes with masculinity and comes with being a man. That's a choice you have to make. You have to pay the price in full. You will have to pay the price in advance. Now, since I talk about relationships, let me perhaps share with you with something that I think is important. I call this my tenets, irrespective of your age. 0 to 17, 18 to 35, or 35 and above. My focus, however, will be 35 and below. So two groups. Number one, do not get married before age 30, preferably age 35. Let that be a focal point. We'll start with that. There's something that comes on in a man's mind from 35 and above. It's as though you come to your road to Damascus moment and the scales fall off your eyes and you see things more clearly. Number two, do not get anyone pregnant as a man at all, at least before age 35 or 30. Ideally 35, but 30 is acceptable. Up until age 35, 95% of your time and your focus should be on your success. Your education, your profession, your financial independence, your wealth, most importantly, your purpose. Your purpose. At the core of the two values I gave you, CV and MV, CV is character value. MV is your manhood value. What undergirds your manhood value is your purpose as a man. Up until age 30, you should focus on your career, your profession, your education, and being your best self. Apprentice, learn under someone else. Let someone pay you for the opportunity for you to learn under them. When you get to 30, that's time to fail. At the core of manhood is failure. Most men remain as boys because they've never failed. And they move quickly into starting families before they fail. So they remain as boys because they were not trained or raised by men. Back in the day, the hunter-gatherer days, we would go out with the older men in the community and they would teach us how to hunt. We would watch, we would take steps, but we will be protected from ourselves because we haven't learned enough. It takes time. I usually give 5 years. 30 to 35 is your years of failure. Start a business, pursue your purpose, recognizing that you've reached a level of security. Perhaps I should say this in the right way. 18 to 22, 5 years, college. Some people it's 4 years. Let's say you take a year off. 24 to 30, 6 years. You need about 10,000 hours of constant and continuous improvement for you to attain a mastery in anything. You need 10,000 hours. There are 2,000 working hours every year. Across 5 years is 10,000 hours. But boys do not do things in a straight line. Men do not. So I allow an extra 20%, which is an extra year. That should get you to 30. At 30, you've been educated properly and you've worked hard for 5 years plus 1. You've saved, you've invested, so you have some security, but you haven't failed. You haven't identified that obsession you have in your heart, that thing that calls you, that assignment, that task, that purpose, that calling. 30 to 35 is when we allow you the opportunity. During this phase, women we put to the side. 95% of your time is on your purpose, your success, focus. 5% could be on women. This means you never self-sabotage your success for what's between a woman's legs. You stay focused so you become successful. When you get to 35, when you get to 30 and you've started failing, about halfway through, you can start to entertain potentially a helpmeet, someone to join you in that purpose and that mission. 35 is the time when you can say, I can start a family or I can get married. You might start this a few years earlier if you found the right person. But the key thing is for you to have the opportunity to go through your manhood phase and come out successful before you take on the burden or the responsibility of other people. Simple tenets. The 5% of your time therefore means you might date. Do whatever you want, but be careful. Protect your seed and discipline yourself. Now, one of the reasons I go through all of that, you might say, scientific, rigid approach, a man is only as faithful as the temptations he has overcome. You will only be as successful as the temptations you've endured and overcome. There are a few tests that you must go through as a man. A test for wealth and fame, a test for power, a test for your loins or sex. You have to master that desire you have in you. The same energy that we need for creativity can be diverted to a sexual exploit. Most men fail, either because we cannot control our urges, or because our urges and our desires are always changing. If you can master, control yourself as part of the journey towards manhood, you will meet with success, unexpected, in uncommon hours. And let me end today's session by simply saying as follows. All I've shared today, I hope, will become perhaps an introduction to a series of sessions about different topics, about success for men, and where you can start. I'll leave you with the following. You cannot do this alone. No one does it alone. You will need someone. Sometimes the cross might be too heavy, and you might need a Simon to help you up to the place of skulls, help you carry that cross all the way up. And this simply means you need a pack. You need a group of men who you trust, mostly men who can see further than you can. Find people who can see the best in you when sometimes the best in you is obscure to yourself. Men who either have lived longer, experienced much, failed, but who are good men, who can direct you. The same way a company has a board of directors, people who can advise you and be there for you, who are capable and available, and who really care for you. As part of the process of success, you need to learn how to, I'll use the word, pursue and court other men. Not romantically, but so that you have good people, intelligent people, wise people, people with good discernment and judgment around you. Most people fail in life, not because they don't aim, but because they don't have the right people watching them take that aim and helping them correct. You will need one of those. Now, I hope this has been a useful session.